Welcome back to Fossil Ridge Games. Today we are going to be talking about Spider-Man, specifically the Miles Morales version for Marvel Champions Living Card Game. In general, I think the Sinister Motives set is a little bit easier to play than some of the other heroes and expansions that I've seen previously for this game. I also think there's a pretty heavy emphasis on maybe trying to get some teenage players into the mix based upon the complexity level of the heroes. In addition to that, I think they really resonate with a lot of the younger audience. So I think this expansion set, if you're looking for maybe a gift, this would be a great way to get younger players involved in Marvel Champions. Let's get into the cards. So specifically Miles Morales, you're going to see a recovery value of 4, and with this version of Spider-Man only having 9 hit points, he can recover pretty quickly and get back out into the field rapidly. So the response of Miles Morales is when he flips to alter ego form. So when you start the game, it's not going to trigger, but after you change to the alter ego form, you can take a Spider-Man card from your discard pile and shuffle it into your deck, which is pretty cool. And, you know, this is a pretty common mechanic that you see throughout the game. The other thing I want to mention is this support card. It's a Persona, Jefferson Davis. You can only play this in your alter ego form. Exhaust Jefferson Davis, remove 1 threat from a scheme with the least threat. So kind of what I'm seeing with this sort of deck, I would guess you can pop in and out of alter ego form a little bit more often than some of the other heroes. And there are some cards in this deck that definitely help facilitate that. Think of the hero version of the Spider-Man as almost like the status effect master, so to speak. So literally on the front of this card, you can find reference to all 3 of the stats cards, so stun, confuse, and toughness. So what's kind of interesting about this is that there are special abilities that are only triggered by other cards in the hero cards that come with this expansion set. So the first one's Venom Blast. You can deal 2 damage to an enemy, and then you can stun that enemy. So kind of keep that in your mind, in the back of your mind, that stuns and confuse are going to be really excellent and powerful for this version of Spider-Man. Spider Camouflage says give Spider-Man a tough status card and then also confuse the enemy. So you can see that this version of Spider-Man can literally put down all 3 status effect cards in the game, and we'll see later how some of the stuff can trigger his other special abilities. One way that you can tell that you have a nice intro-level character is that all of the stats on the character are somewhat average. So what's great about this version of Spider-Man, all of the ability scores are 2, so thwart, attack, and defense. The hit point value is a little bit low at 9. The recovery value that we talked about on the alter ego side is a little bit higher than normal, which is a 4. Something else that makes this deck easy for new players is specifically the web shooter. I didn't think that they would ever reprint hero cards, but here we go again. So the original Spider-Man deck, the hero deck that comes in the core game, literally has these 2 upgrades present. And what's great about it is that it allows you to exhaust and generate wild resources. And that's pretty fantastic. This is great for a new player. So when you're trying to get into the game, you want sort of average ability scores, and also that toughness effect on Spider Camouflage is great for survival. And then in addition to that, you have sort of nice resource scaling. These are very cheap to bring out. It helps you bring out your other support and upgrade cards as well. Something that I mentioned before is that both stun and confuse status effect cards are really important to this version of Spider-Man. And here's one of the examples. This is called Arachnobatics. And this is a really cheap event that you can play, and you can deal 2 points of damage to an enemy, but it gets even more and more powerful if that enemy has a stun status card on them or a confuse status card, and these actually stack. So first you deal 2 points of damage, then you check to see if it has a stun status card. So if it does, then you add an additional 3 points of damage, so now you're at 5. And then you check again for a confused status card, and then you can jack that all the way up to 8. So as a recommendation, when you are building the Spider-Man deck, look for cards in the deck that allow you to put additional status effects on enemies, and then you can make these Arachnobatics cards even more powerful. I'm going to talk about the next three cards in conjunction because I think they really trigger off of one another. In the center, we have the Web Shooter, and remember that this allows you to generate wild resources. Why is that important for this deck? Because of Web Shot and Swing In. So if you look at these cards, they're looking for specific resources. In this case, we are looking for an energy resource, and then on the one on the right, we're looking for a mental resource. So if you look at these two things, you can get some special abilities out of Spider-Man if you play the correct resource. So having the Web Shooter and generating that wild resource to pay for Web Shot and Swing In, that's the name of the game. So you want to try to get your Web Shooters out as soon as possible to help you augment these cards. So the first one is going to be Web Shot. This is obviously a hero action. You're going to deal 4 damage to an enemy, but if you use the energy resource, you can then resolve the Venom Blast, specifically on Spider-Man. So we're going to go ahead and pop back to that real quick. Special, deal 2 damage to an enemy, and then you can stun that enemy. So what we're finding is that these are the cards that actually trigger Venom Blast. And then the one on the right is known as Swing In. And this is a thwarting card, so you can move 4 threat from a scheme. That's pretty hefty. In addition to that, if we're going to use our Web Shooter, we can then generate a mental resource, and then we can resolve the Spider Camouflage ability, which then drops an additional Confuse and then Toughness token onto the enemy. So this is going to be your primary mechanism of how you're going to start triggering Venom Blast and the Spider Camouflage abilities. Here are 2 additional ways that we can trigger Spider-Man's special abilities, both the Venom Blast and the Spider Camouflage. These are both 1-cost upgrades, so they're going to sit out onto the table, and both of these have triggered responses. These are hero responses, and after you use a basic power, and both of these trigger the same way, you can discard these cards, and then you can resolve either the Venom Blast ability with power from within, or defense mechanism will trigger the Spider Camouflage ability. So what's kind of cool about this is that, especially if you're new to the game, what a basic power is, or any of these 3, so thwart, attack, and defense. So if you trigger any of those, you can then discard this card to essentially trigger another ability on Spider-Man. So there's kind of this sort of chain reaction of events that occurs when you start playing with this deck. So just kind of remember the order of operations. That stuns and confuses are also very potent and powerful in this deck. So when you're doing deck building, look for cards that add those status effects also. Let's go ahead and just finish off the remainder of the cards that appear in this hero set. There's 2 copies of Double Life. You can only play 1 of these per round, and it allows you to change your form. So if you're aware of this game, there's kind of like a limit of you can change your form once during your phase. And next up, what you can do is use this card, and there's many of these in the game, to change it an additional time. And so once again, now we're seeing another trigger. So we have a physical resource trigger. So let's talk about our Web Shooter again that generates that wild resource. You can use it on this card as well. So if you paid for a physical resource, you can ready your identity. So what's kind of cool is that you can get basically an extra use out of Spider-Man by just paying that physical resource by using your Web Shooter. So let's say you go ahead and exhaust Spider-Man, you're doing a basic attack, you hit something for 2 points of damage. Then maybe you want to change forms real quick. So you can flop him over onto his alter ego form. When you do that, it's going to trigger his special ability. You can take something from your discard pile, a Spider-Man card, and shuffle it into your draw deck. And then what else is cool about this, if you did the physical resource, then you can ready him. So you're going to ready Miles. Now, this is a really cool option. Once you do this, now that he's ready, you can also then recover with him on the same turn. So kind of what I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it's okay for him to pop in and out of form a little bit more often than most of the characters, and what allows you to do it is this Double Life card. Then also too, we have one of his associates here, so you can exhaust this card to draw 1 card. So if you are in alter ego sort of form, you can just draw the card, okay? But if you're in hero form, you draw the card and then you have to discard 1. So this effect is going to change depending upon the form that you're in. at this point, if you've been following this game for a while, you pretty much know some just basic deck building ideas for Spider-Man. I don't think it's anything radically different from what you've seen in the past. I think you could throw a deck together with honestly any of the aspects really quickly. So what I'm going to focus on in the rest of the video is really the concept of not the hero cards, but rather some of the support cards that you can have. This expansion adds something really fun and really inventive. I enjoyed what I'm about to tell you about more than I did the actual Spider-Man deck. And so what they did is they introduced sort of the concept of your support cards can kind of have like a faction association. So a lot of these cards in the Spider-Man deck are associated with S.H.I.E.L.D. And this is really great. It's kind of an extra way to build some sort of fun and theme into your deck. And what's great about this, you can throw these cards in with any hero if you like playing sort of this support structure. It's a pretty cool idea. So you could mix any hero, let's say, with the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent sort of side of the game. And they did a really good job sort of bringing this new theme to life. So I'm going to go ahead and show you some of these cards. So we have this government liaison card, and I'm going to walk through this first because it kind of gets the entire combo for the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents moving. So it says, hero action, exhaust government liaison, and play a S.H.I.E.L.D. card from your hand, reducing its resource cost by 1. That's pretty fantastic. We have 3 copies of this in the deck. So think of it as you can start building supports so that you can support your S.H.I.E.L.D. operations. So you're kind of almost building the S.H.I.E.L.D. organization while you're playing the game. And that's a pretty fun sort of thing. The next one that I'm going to show you is the Sky Destroyer on the right, which is a rare card. It says after you play a S.H.I.E.L.D. card, exhaust the Sky Destroyer to deal 2 points of damage to an enemy. This is a lot of fun. So you have the resource mechanism on the left-hand side of the screen. And so when you're starting to play out a lot of these S.H.I.E.L.D. cards, then you can trigger this Sky Destroyer every turn for an extra 2 points of damage. It actually adds up quite a bit over the course of a game. And kind of like I said before, I had more fun playing the S.H.I.E.L.D. faction than I did Spider-Man when I was going through the playtesting of this deck. And I'm going to walk you through some of the other cool parts of this expansion. So after we have a bunch of these government liaison cards out, or even one, we can start building our support structure for this deck. So there are a lot of allies, and this expansion added a bunch of S.H.I.E.L.D. allies, but I encourage you to sort of go back and look through the game. There are some old favorites that you can use, in addition to some of the new cards that are generated by the set. So I'm just going to go ahead and just start putting some of them down onto the table so you can check them out. So we have a Spider-Woman that's a S.H.I.E.L.D. Card. We also have this guy who's a new card. He's also a S.H.I.E.L.D. card. We have Agent 13. Then we also have some old favorites like Mockingbird, good old Nick Fury, and then also War Machine. So when you start putting these faction decks together, you can go through your collection and then start adding some of those allies back into it, and you can bring them out a little bit easier by using these government liaison cards. Something else that blew me away with this set is Monica Chang. This card is absolutely fantastic. When I first saw it, I kind of had to take a pause, and then when I started playing it, it's a very cool idea and concept. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you have a basic card, you have a surveillance team, and this thing has existed since the original core set. But what's cool is that the game designers have said, you know what, we have this sort of S.H.I.E.L.D. motif. We're going to throw Monica Chang into the mix with the supports. So what's cool about this is that once we have our government liaisons out, we can start playing surveillance teams, and they're a lot cheaper. In addition to that, this card is fantastic. After Monica enters play, search your deck, hand, and discard pile for a copy of Surveillance Team and put it into play. So when you put something into play, it doesn't say pay the cost or anything like that. If you put something into play, it just goes into play, so you don't have to pay the resource cost for it. In addition to that, place 1 snoop counter on each surveillance team you control. So when this thing pops out onto the table, you're going to put 3 snoop counters onto it. In addition to that, she's going to put an additional counter onto it as well. Then on top of it, if you have additional surveillance teams out, since these are non-unique, you can have up to 3 of them out on the table at once. Each one of those surveillance teams would get an additional Snoop token. So this is very thematic when it comes to the original Shield cards. In addition to that, with the new sort of Shield organization that you're building, I found this card absolutely wonderful and fun to play. It kind of brought back some of the older cards from the first set that I had, played with for a little while, and it kind of gave them a fresh coat of paint, so I thought that was really exciting. So here are some additional cards that came in this expansion, specifically Shield related. The first one is pretty amazing, and I was stunned. The first time I read it, I thought, oh, that can't be right, and then I read through the card several more times. I'm like, oh yeah, this is correct. This card is extremely powerful. Exhaust one Shield card you control, great, not a big deal. You can exhaust something like the Government Liaison if you want, because that is a Shield card. Look at the top 4 cards of a player deck. That's pretty cool. But then you can look at the encounter deck as well. Anytime you can look into the encounter deck and kind of figure out what's going to happen to you, that's super powerful. And it's 4 cards. It's not just 1 or 2, it's 4, and that's pretty significant. Discard any number of those and put the others on top or bottom of the deck in any order. This is amazing, especially when it comes to the encounter deck. If you're playing, let's say some sort of heavy assault style scenarios where you've got a lot of really big minions, maybe they got 6, 7, 8 hit points on them, and you can see them coming at you, and you can just simply take them and throw them in the discard pile, that's absolutely awesome. That's absolutely amazing. In addition to that, you can prune your own deck. You can rearrange it and reorganize it. So if you're kind of maybe struggling on resources, or maybe you need some threat mitigation cards, or maybe you need, whatever it is, some attack cards, you can prune your deck. Global Logistics, this card is absolutely amazing, extremely versatile. It'd be versatile if you could just rearrange the encounter deck, but the fact that you can look at a player deck, so we can take it a step further. You don't even have to look at your own deck. You could be manipulating somebody else's deck on the table, like one of your friends that's playing. You can look through their deck if they're having a little bit of a hard time. So that's absolutely amazing. So very, very versatile card. Next one is Homeland Intervention, and this one's cool too. This one's a little bit more situational. It's a little bit harder to do. So you have to exhaust up to 3 Shield cards. So remember, that could be some of your supports that you have out. That could be some of your allies. And then you choose a scheme, and you can remove 2 threat from that scheme for each card exhausted this way. So, case in point, maybe you're kind of in the late game, and we're just going to assume, for the ease of this, that you have all 3 of these cards out. You can go ahead and exhaust all of these and remove 6 threat. That's pretty hefty, and that's pretty wild. That's a great way to just annihilate threat that's out on the table. And then the one that's on the right-hand side of the screen. So previously in the video, I showed you all of the allies that you can bring out that are Shield related. This Field Agent card, is going to help you keep those in play a little bit longer. It says when a Shield ally would take any amount of consequential damage, so the consequential damage is going to be when you were exhausting them to, do an attack, maybe you're doing a thwart action. You can use this card to basically stop that damage from occurring, or 1 point of the damage. So in general, most allies have 1 consequential damage when you use them. Sometimes you find them, they have 2 points here and there. But this is a great way to keep them out in play longer so you can utilize their special abilities. So to kind of summarize, if you want to try a really cool justice-oriented deck, take all of these cards, all of these Shield cards, and mix and match them with other cards that you find in your collection. You're going to find them intermittently. Like, I looked through most of the heroes. I only found, a few of the heroes. They do have some Shield cards, but there's no hero that has, predominantly Shield cards in their deck. You find them here and there, interspersed throughout your collection. But go ahead and try this out. I found it more exciting than playing Spider-Man, was literally playing all of these Justice Shield support cards. To summarize, I think Spider-Man is a nice sort of intro level character, maybe for new players. Maybe you have some friends or some people in your life that are a little bit younger, and you want to try to get them into this game. This would be a great expansion to purchase for them. So you kind of have the Spider-Man motif, the Miles Morales character, But kind of more importantly, if you're looking for something fresh and new in Marvel Champions, look to the sort of like alternate factions that come with this deck. So once I go through the Ghost Spider stuff, I'll be doing that video next. You also have a pretty strong presence with an alternate faction with that deck as well. So that's a lot of fun. So really, I think all in all, I think Spider-Man's okay, but really focus on the shield cards. Try building a shield deck. I think it's pretty easy to do. And like, obviously I didn't say this before, but Helicarrier, that's a shield card as well. So you can throw that into the mix. You're probably already doing that anyway. But go ahead and explore the faction of shield. I think it's really exciting. And like I said before, you can mix it with almost any character and it works really, really well. And it's a lot of fun to play. Just kind of like, hey, I'm putting the shield organization together and it's helping support me fight the villain. I thought it was really cool, really thematic, and a lot of fun. I want to thank you all today for joining me for this video. And as always, have fun gaming.